Okay, rulers, settle down. Ruler School is brought to you by Odyssey Games, where you can go to get pre-orders of all the upcoming Force of Will sets, as well as releases of previous sets after they come out. TCGprime.com with over 100,000 Force of Will singles, as well as out-of-print boxes from the past, and TCG accessories, as well as FowlLibrary.com, a wonderful resource for deck lists, article discussions, and more. Check them out at FowlLibrary.com, as well as these amazing patrons. Special thanks to guest lecturer members Vite Ramen and Shukong Fu. Thank you for your support. Class is in session. Hey the rulers, Demo73 here, bringing you another Wanderer feature match for the week. Before we get into it, again, I just want to let you know that Odyssey Games still has pre-orders up for the next set, Game of Gods Reloaded. You can check it out in the link in the description to get your pre-release kits, or if we're a little closer to the release, you could get full boxes. Pre-order, check them out right there, so you're all set to go for this next set. It is looking like quite a fun set to jump into, so I hope you pick them up. As we go into this match, we have Paul on the right, who is playing a Pricia, green-red Pricia deck. I've nicknamed it Resonance Picnic because it's trying to really abuse the resonance mechanic, specifically, you know, when a stone hits field, that kind of idea, using some of the new support as well as some of Pricia's old support and some unlikely little cards that you'll see. And then Dalton is playing his take on Loki, which is a black, blue, green. They're playing Wanderer, so they have access to dual stones. So let's go ahead and see how this goes. The interesting thing about this Paul's list is that it really never flips Pricia. It's not trying to, it's really just trying to use her front side to get that swiftness and flying to stuff as you have stones hit the field. There's been a lot of resonance enablers and some cool cards that can kind of really make use of that to get some pretty good pressure going. Turn 1, we see a Fire Magic Stone. Then we just see a pass, I believe, from Paul. We're going to see, looks like probably a coin-ordered Loki here, which makes the most sense. It's one of Loki's strongest early game plays. We have a Volmel here to get us that draw power, and then Calling Stone into 6 Sage Stone. Setting us up for nicely being able to deal with whatever Paul might be throwing down next turn. Without there being Loki's strength in the non-order matchups is a little suspect because of the fact, you know, again, you don't get access to an order card to kill. You're just killing your own. But that being said, Loki puts a lot of pressure with some of the cards, especially once you start to get into this like Schmel loop, where you can keep a lot of pressure on your opponent just by without having to worry about them having an order or not. So we see a Magic Stone of Reincarnation here, which is a green-red stone, counted as a wind and fire magic stone. Still don't have any cards down here from Paul to be able to trigger the resonance trigger of Pricia, but we do see that Sacred Elf come down, which will help starting next turn. For those of you who are aren't familiar, Pricia, red-green Pricia, has resonance for Wind Magic Stone to give a Resonator Flying, and Resonator Fire Magic Stone to get a Resonator Swiftness. As we go into Dalton's turn, especially seeing that he has that Schmel in hand, I would think that the play here should probably be to, in his recovery, remove all of the abilities from Sacred Elf and remove all of the abilities from Sacred Elf and Volmel to then like force Paul to have to use the will then, and if he can't, then you just move to recovery. At that point in time, you set up the Schmel and start ripping his hand apart. Instead, we're going to see at end of turn Paul have to tap down the fairy Sacred Elf due to Fairy of Trickery. So I like this play a lot. The idea here, unfortunately hitting a 6 Sage Stone here, the idea would have been nice to say, let's use Volmel to kill the Sacred Elf and then leave up Fairy of Trickery. The problem is there you don't have goodwill. Now, there is a world where you could, if you don't really mind tapping out yourself, you could go pay 1 blue, float the blue, swing in to try to trade, then remove all of his abilities, then kill him, then pay 1 for the Schmel. Ultimately, though, just choosing to go face, which I think is not quite the best decision here. You had the opportunity to steal some value off of Paul and kind of keep him at back foot, and you also forgot to you forgot to float here before you swung with the Volmel, so now those 6 Sage Stones are just Void Stones. So a little bit of a misplay, and again, just an illustration of keeping in mind how 6 Sage Stone works with Order Rulers is pretty important. Before recovery, it looks like, in main phase, because that Sacred Elf's not going to get tapped recovered because of that. We see a Isis come down here, and then we call a stone with Pricia. So now this is going to trigger three different resonance triggers. It's going to trigger Pricia twice for giving her swiftness and flying, and then it's also going to trigger Isis to be able to produce an extra red. Then we're going to use that to play Red Wine and Basket, and unfortunately, Dalton's going to use Loki's Deception here, which is a nice play to steal the Red Wine and Basket enter effect to be able to then have him get a stone. Unfortunately, hit another 6 Sage Stone, so it's still going to be void. That was real unfortunate there. And then we're going to see, a banish of the Magic Stone of Reincarnation to Isis, which also then triggers Magic Stone of Reincarnation when it's sent from field to grave. You get to draw a card, so now Isis banishes that stone and turns it essentially into a Pot of Greed, which is pretty cool. Then he can use that floating red. What are we going to do with it? He's just going to pass the turn there. So we're at a pretty good spot here. We get a 4th stone. That Magic Stone of the 6 Sage did go away. I still think that there's a world where we're trying to use Fairy of Trickery at least to kill the Sacred Elf. Paul is completely tapped out at this point, so there's a lot of value to be had there. Also, seeing that we have the Schmel in hand makes me think that we should go ahead and just try to do that as well. There's a world where you just use the Volmel to try to kill the Sacred Elf and see if it baits out the Isis or not, or just to try to sit and see, or just take the safe route and play the Fairy of Trickery. One of the greatest things that Schmel can do in these kinds of matchups when you have it out is to be able to set up that permanent board neg for a whole turn. So if you can really reestablish, you can really prevent your opponent from reestablishing themselves or being able to any kind of mount up any kind of wall, and then you can just chip them to death. We're going to see just going to straight attack here. We see a destruction of Volmel, and then we're probably going to see that order with that floating black from earlier with the 6 Sage Stone for that Schmel. So this is really good. The Schmel's going to get to rip 2 cards out of Paul's hands. He did get to draw 2 for free off of the Isis, but I think there's a world where as soon as Paul tries to commit another card to the field, you just pop the Schmel, so that you apply this neg 10 and get the most value off of it possible. Especially if you have Loki enters the Game of Gods and a second Schmel in hand, then you feel really, really good at this point. Looks like Paul has Fairer Spell. Another Isis. Doesn't feel super great right now. Looks like a Phaley. I'm a huge fan of Phaley, as you guys know. Hit that another Magic Stone of Reincarnation, which will trigger 4 resonances. Double Isis, Red Wine, Isis, and double Pricia. So 1 stone, 4 resonance triggers. It's a picnic. He's going to make it so that red wine's going to resolve second to last, and the 2 Pricias are going to resolve first. Or resolve absolutely last. This is the time where I think you pop the stat nag. I think it's the best moment to do so. We're going to see a Loki enters the game of gods. Seeing if that gets canceled. He says, no, that's fine. He starts to play Phantasmal Scarlet. I think he doesn't quite realize that he can't. It doesn't have quick cast because he's not playing Nyarlathotep. So now he's going to let those triggers resolve. So he's going to not interrupt any of them. We have now a +2/+2 on the board, which makes Schmel feel not as good. One more of those for any kind of source, and suddenly your Schmel's not able to apply that stat neg. We do now have floating of some kind from that Loki enters the game of gods, so the hope is that we've got some kind of quick cast body that we can use. The one advantage of there being the Fairy of Trickery on board is that if Paul somehow does play another body that's going to be too big for Schmel, when the Fairy of Trickery dies, we'll be able to tap it down. Like, that feels really nice. The advantage here for Paul, though, is he has a Fairer spell, so any Resonator, although that also goes back to being Dalton's advantage in the form of ordering and the fact that you can't cancel an order. So if we had Schmel into Schmel, we'd be in a really, really, really good spot. Dalton's gonna potentially, so we see a quick cast ordered, or a quick cast Dracula come down here, and that's probably gonna bait out the Fairer spell at this point. So I wonder what's gonna happen at that. So I think it's a little bit of a sequencing thing that we could have done. Since we had the quick cast Resonator anyway, we could have applied the -10, quick casted in a Dracula who would have immediately died, but then come back bigger, but then it died again. So that the end of our next turn as Loki, going into Paul's turn, we'd have this 8/8 Dracula ready to go on top of what else we wanted to do. Overall, I think that was just like not necessary damage to take. Dalton looks like he might be trying to set up to be able to play the addition. Ultimately, though, just a pass from Paul after swinging in for that 9 damage with Isis. Now we're going to see that Phantasmal Scarlet come down to kill the Isis. We know Paul has another one in hand, though, which has quick cast, which is pretty good. A Call of Darkness comes down here, which gets to go search him something else. This is the kind of turn where, like, the reason why this feels so weird is we didn't need to use that Phantasmal Scarlet. We could have just killed Schmel, and then it would have set up another Schmel, and we would have saved ourselves some will here. Swinging in for 6 and then another 13, which takes Paul down to 5. Then we're going to see the pop Schmel, which is going to kill his fairy. Has nothing to be able to target, but now we have to try to hit black. We don't have a way to hit black to be able to replay the Schmel. And this is what I'm talking about, where if we had just not used the Phantasmal Scarlet and instead had just played, killed the swung, killed the Schmel, we would have had the will to be able to play the Schmel from hand here at this point. And Dalton unfortunately has to rely on Magic Stone of the Tides, and Magic Stone did not come up as getting him the darkness. So instead it gets blue, which lets him play the addition, but the addition's not really going to do much right now. And he's left himself open to just 1 blue against a deck that very clearly likes to go very fast and has an established red, white, and bread, which is not great for Dalton. At the end of the turn, we're going to go ahead and see a Pricia's Big Show come in here just for some fixing. Looks like before draw on his turn, maybe after draw on his turn, we're going to see that Isis come down. She doesn't have any kind of effect. Yeah, it does look like it's going to be after draw, so that we didn't die to the -10. Makes sense, especially since we're about to get a bunch of stones anyway, I'm sure, to make her very, very large, and probably give her swiftness. There's the beginning of it. 4 triggers again for Magic Stone of Reincarnation. So we're going to be able to give Isis swiftness and flying. We're going to produce an extra red. We have a +2/+2 for the whole turn for red, white, and red. We're working with a lot of resources here. See a Pricia's Big Show to get up to 2 Pricias. And now we can use the 1 floating red from Isis along with just 1 green stone to cast that to grab a 2-drop. Oh, no, we're going to go more intensive. We're going to see Magic Stone Dance of Chaos off of the 1 stone, which is going to get us another grand total of each of those green red stones is 4 triggers. And then the Fire Magic Stone is an additional 3. So 11 resonance triggers off of that 1 spell. 3 Isis for Firestone, 4 red wine and 3 red wine and basket Firestone, 3 Pricia Firestone, and then 2 Pricia Wind. A little strange to me that we didn't see a Pricia grab before casting that, just to maximize our chances here, to be able to give like multiple things swiftness off of the Pricia. Ultimately, though, we are going to see that Pricia get cast, which is then going to get us a 2-drop. And a very good 2-drop here to grab to keep the resonance chain going is the Guardian Dragon of the Kingdom, which gets us a stone into play tapped, which then triggers all of our resonance abilities again. So for those of you counting at home, we're up to a grand total of 15 resonance triggers this turn, and there's 4 more. So we're up to 19 this turn. And now we can give the Dragon swiftness and Pricia flying. We need to somehow give Pricia swiftness if she's going to try to swing this turn, but we're also at 5 red wine and bread pumps. We can sack stones to draw cards off of Isis. Each of those Magic Stones of Reincarnation sacrifice means 2 cards. And so now probably should have swung with Guardian Dragon first just to not miss out on that 200 damage, but you might be fine either way. So base stats 300, 300, and it looks like they just do some quick mental math there, and yeah, that's just lethal just from the Isis and the Dragon. So out of nowhere, full field, a lot of resonance triggers, next game. So the thing about that situation is like that wouldn't have been nearly as powerful had Dalton played the line properly with the Schmells. He would have been not taking nearly as much damage because Paul needed that Isis to resolve to be able to make those plays. And if he had had a Schmel up for during Paul's turn, or be able to set a neg 10 up during Paul's turn, that pressure wouldn't have been there. So it's really important just to kind of remember how you're going to sequence things. And try to get the most value off of 1 card as much as possible. Once again, we see that same kind of opening, only this time we see a Dracula get ordered. Ooh, and we see a Gradius come down to stop the Dracula, which means it won't get to revive because it will have lost the ability and then gotten killed. Oh, maybe not. Maybe I messed that up. Maybe because of where it triggers, it doesn't actually lose that ability. Paul committing to that Guardian Dragon. It's a pretty strong opener, especially since it's going to get him swiftness and flying. Gets a permanent stone, so he gets to immediately swing in for 900 in the air. This is pretty good. Block with the Dracula, who gets to come back. Ooh, I do see a dolly in that hand. There's a very real possibility of us seeing an ordered dolly here just to get that order on board. I think we just cycle using dolly here to draw an additional card. Is choosing to give him the dragon back interesting, especially since we know that's just going to ramp him another stone, and we've got the resonance triggers from Pricia. I would think that you would want to just go ahead and draw to keep your hand full there, unless we're planning on another, you know, stealing your enter effect, at which point maybe in time that's the best play. But when you're going second and have no way to ramp stones, giving your opponent a tool to ramp feels mediocre. Looks like we might have seen something there before recovery. Ultimately, though, we're going to see a pass. See that Isis come down here, and now we're going to start being able to do some pretty crazy resonance triggers. Thus, we see some form of spot removal from Dalton. Calling a stone with Pricia gets us another 3. Or another 4 resonance triggers. No, it's just 3. We don't have a red line right now. Using that 1 red. Oof, down comes the Magic Stone Dance of Chaos. If we don't have a way to stop it, that dragon is going to be very, very large, swinging in for a lot of damage very quickly. And I do see we have a Loki's Deception in hand there. Bunch more triggers. No red wine and bread this time. Use one of the floating. Play Guardian Dragon. Now a huge thing here would be to steal this enter effect, right? Because it means that we don't have a way to give it swiftness this turn, which would feel really good unless Paul has another way to be able to get a stone. This is also nice because it just like actually permanently ramps Dalton a stone, unlike the last time where he stole the red, white, and bread. Like Guardian Dragon's just an actual ramp card. So this feels pretty good. So he's got a couple floating red here. He could choose to sacrifice one of those temporary stones to draw a card or draw 2 cards. But then it'd be, you know, so maybe that's worth your time. Yep, there we go. We're going to see that get sacked. It's going to go to the bottom of the stone deck at the end of turn anyway. Might as well get as much value off of it as possible. Banishing another stone with Isis. And in comes the Isis. He says, as we move into combat, we're going to go ahead and Fairy of Trickery to tap it down. And then we see a Gradius there with one of the extra floating, which removes its ability to tap something else down. And we see a second Gradius to kill the Dracula. And this time again, where we don't have a Dracula coming back. Interesting. Trying to roll with Magic Stone of Tides, we can use a Dolly to make it non-random, in which case we're going to see, I think, yes, a Call of Darkness here. Gets to go get us what we need. So, again, this is the play line where if we have a Schmel already and we have Loki enters the Game of Gods, like that feels pretty good. Paul has a lot of cards in his hand. It looks like he has four cards left in hand. So, like, Schmel into Schmel is really good here. The idea of, you know, during Paul's, we order Schmel this turn, during Paul's turn after he draws, but before he recovers, we, you know, do another Schmel to just really get him down to almost no cards, and apply a neg 10 to make that dragon only hitting us for 100. We're going to see a swing in. He chooses to block with the dragon, which I actually think is a mistake. Because now we're in a position where I think there's a world, we've got the damage on him. There's a world where we just almost maybe even immediately pop this Schmel, especially since Paul's down to 2 cards. Maybe that's still not the right answer, but I do think if we have Loki enters the Game of Gods and a second Schmel, then it's worth next turn just popping Schmel, applying the neg 10 to the board, immediately going into another Schmel with Loki enters, and making the dragon say, hi, I'm a 1/1, or if he wants to discard, if he wants to banish a stone, then it'll immediately kill the dragon. So, like, he can get cards in his hand, but it'll kill the dragon kind of thing. And not doing it before he recovers, I think, is a mistake, because we know that he's playing Pricia, and he only has to have cast 1. So if Paul happens to be playing Lorite in this deck, then suddenly a Pricia of 1 gets him the Lorite, which then shuts off your Schmels, or even worse, like, they lets you pop it, and then in response to the neg 10 trigger, we go get Lorite, which feels like exactly what's about to happen as Paul responds. So, yep, Pricia comes down here in response to the neg 10. It doesn't matter what the top cards are. We're just going to immediately cast the Pricia. We're going to go get a Lorite. It's going to stop the neg 10 trigger. And now we're just going to take a ton of damage and let Paul go off for a turn. This is one of those situations where, like, trying to be proactive is really, really important for some of these matchups, and it's some of the main strength that Schmel brings to the table. Like, if we had applied this neg 10 in advance, then, like, we'd be in a much better shape. That being said, if we have Loki enters the Game of Gods here, maybe we can still do an ordered Schmel, but I at this point in time, I don't know if that's something present in Dalton's hand. So now with only 1 will, we've got a 20/20 addition on the field, but we can just fly over it. We're going to just start to see some combat. Goes down to 27. Banishing a stone to draw some more cards. And, like, if we had killed the Isis, then we couldn't refill our hand here. Floating red for red wine and bread, which means now we're going to be able to give this Pricia swiftness, and probably the Isis flying. Yep, exactly. We're going to give everybody a +2/+2 bonus. Pricia gets to now have swiftness. Isis now gets to have flying. They both are now 9/9s. Yeah, it's going to not end well here as we combo out. So this is just a good example of not against a deck like this, shutting its turn down proactively is the best play, because we see we have another Guardian Dragon here, which is now going to give Guardian Dragon swiftness, and we can give Pricia flying, so now all of them can swing, and at that point in time, it's just going to be swinging in for lethal. So there you guys have it. That is the match. Just how crazy some of the resonance stuff is when you combine it with a ruler that was resonance focused like Pricia. We will have the deck profile for the resonance picnic up later this week, and we will see you guys next time. So until then, this is DMO73 saying class dismissed.